I stepped into the warmly lit two-story house in Atlanta, Georgia on Christmas Eve, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey cinnamon pies and mulled wine. Twinkling lights draped every surface, casting a festive glow over the laughter echoing from the dining room. But for me, Gavin Brooks, the atmosphere felt colder than the snow flurries outside. No one from my wife Cassandra's family rose to greet me as I entered. My mother-in-law Teresa shot me a disdainful glance before continuing to arrange platters on the table. My assigned seat had been shoved to the far end, away from the main gathering, a silent message that I was an outsider in my own marriage. I sat down quietly, saying nothing. No one initiated conversation with me. Then Cassandra emerged from the kitchen, her arm linked with another man, Damon, her sleek new business partner dressed in a tailored suit that screamed privilege. He glanced at me with a mocking smirk. Whispers rippled through the room. Cassandra offered no explanation. She simply sat beside him, her back turned to me as if I were invisible. Glasses clinked. Teresa stood beaming. "Family, we have a special announcement tonight. Cassandra." Cassandra rose, smiling radiantly, and turned to Damon. Then she kissed him deeply right there at the table in front of everyone, including me. Applause erupted. Someone whistled. Teresa laughed heartily. I sat frozen, my eyes fixed on the lipstick smear on her cheek. "What are you doing?" I whispered. Cassandra snapped. "Gavin, don't make a scene. Don't ruin my family's night." Teresa approached, tossing an envelope at me. "Divorce papers. Sign them. What are you still doing here?" Before I could respond, something cold and filthy splashed across my face. Teresa had dumped a basin of dirty dishwater over me, soaking my shirt amid the roaring laughter of the table. I didn't wipe it away immediately. Water dripped onto the floor as I stood tall, scanning their faces. "Thank you," I said evenly, "for showing me who you really are." Then I walked out of that house into the night without looking back. As I drove back to my high-rise apartment in downtown Atlanta, the city's skyline blurred through the windshield, a sea of lights that mocked the darkness settling in my chest. The snow had started to fall heavier now, blanketing the streets in a deceptive peace. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the chill from the dishwater still clinging to my skin. But it wasn't the cold that bothered me. It was the clarity it brought. For years, I'd played the role of the unassuming husband, the one who faded into the background while Cassandra and her family shone. Tonight, that illusion shattered, and with it, my patience. I parked in the underground garage, the hum of the engine dying as I sat there for a moment, replaying the scene in my mind. The laughter, the kiss, the envelope slapping against my chest. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my soaked shirt, tasting the bitterness of betrayal. But I didn't linger in anger. Anger was a luxury for those without a plan. I stepped out, rode the private elevator to the penthouse level, and entered my true sanctuary, a sleek modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering metropolis. This wasn't the modest home Cassandra knew. It was my private world, built from the empire I'd concealed to test the authenticity of her love. The apartment was silent except for the soft whir of the climate control. I peeled off my wet clothes, showered quickly to wash away the stench of that night, and changed into a simple gray sweater and pants. Then I sat at my glass desk, the city sprawled below like a chessboard. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face as I logged into the secure portal for Bainbridge Capital, the investment firm I'd co-founded a decade ago, back when I was still in my 20s, hungry and anonymous. And we'd grown it into a powerhouse managing billions in assets. But I'd always kept my involvement low-key, especially after marrying Cassandra. Why? Because true character reveals itself when power is hidden. I navigated to the portfolio dashboard, my fingers steady on the keys. There they were, 3 entries that tied me invisibly to her world. First, Teresa's Delights, the quaint bakery chain her mother had inherited but nearly lost to bad debts 5 years ago. I'd funneled anonymous investments through a charitable fund to save it, propping up expansions and suppliers without a whisper of credit. Second, Damon Enterprises, the flashy real estate firm run by that smirking opportunist. I'd seeded his startup with venture capital 2 years back again through proxies after Cassandra mentioned his promising ideas that were mediocre at best without my backing. And third, Aspire PR, the boutique agency where Cassandra had climbed to vice president, her brother tagging along as a mid-level manager. The firm's survival through economic dips, my discreet infusions disguised as grants from a nonprofit I controlled. I leaned back, rubbing my temples as memories flooded in. 8 years ago, I'd met Cassandra at a charity gala in Buckhead. She was vibrant, ambitious, with a laugh that lit up the room. I was already building Bainbridge, but I downplayed it, introducing myself as a mid-level consultant. She fell for the everyman version of me, the one who worked odd hours, drove a sensible car, and lived modestly. We married quickly, her family welcoming me with polite smiles that hid their judgment. Teresa always hinted I wasn't ambitious enough for her daughter. Cassandra's brother, lazy and entitled, borrowed money from me without repayment. And Damon. He'd slithered in as her business partner 6 months ago, though I suspected more from the late nights and secretive texts. But I'd endured it all, testing if her love was for me or for what I could provide. I'd quietly supported them, bailing Teresa out of foreclosure on her home funding Aspire's office lease when clients dried up, even covering Cassandra's student loans from her PR degree. All anonymous, all to see if gratitude or loyalty would emerge naturally. It never did. Instead, entitlement grew. Tonight's humiliation was the final proof they saw me as disposable a joke to be discarded on Christmas Eve. My jaw tightened. No more. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus, my trusted CFO at Bainbridge. He answered on the first ring, his voice crisp, despite the late hour. "Gavin, everything all right. Terminate all investments tied to the following entities," I said flatly. Teresa's Delights, Damon Enterprises, and Aspire PR. Pull everything, capital, lines of credit, supplier guarantees. Do it at market open tomorrow. No warnings, no negotiations. There was a pause. Marcus knew better than to question me, but he probed gently. "That's abrupt. Any reason?" "They've shown me who they are," I replied, "and it's time they learn who I am." "Understood. It'll be done. Expect fallout legal claims, maybe media if Damon makes noise." "Let them come. I've got the documentation. Everything was structured through the foundation, revocable at my discretion." We ended the call. I closed the laptop, standing by the window as snow swirled against the glass. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. Not vengeful, just resolute. Cassandra thought she'd humiliated a weak man, but she'd awakened someone who'd built fortunes in silence. Tomorrow their world would crumble, and I'd watch from afar, knowing I'd given them every chance to prove themselves worthy. They failed. Now the consequences were theirs to bear. 3 days after that humiliating Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from news alerts and financial feeds, ones I'd set up to monitor the fallout. Atlanta's business scene was abuzz with whispers of sudden collapses. Teresa's Delights. The bakery chain that had become a local staple shuttered overnight. Suppliers repossessed equipment, leaving empty shelves and locked doors. Damon Enterprises, that flashy real estate venture, faced immediate foreclosure on 2 major projects as banks pulled lines of credit without warning. And Aspire PR, the agency where Cassandra had built her career on supposed merit, announced mass layoffs, citing unforeseen financial constraints. Her brother was among the first, cut his cushy position, evaporating like morning fog. I didn't respond to any of it directly. Instead, I watched from my penthouse, sipping black coffee as reports trickled in. Cassandra's texts started flooding my phone. "Gavin, what the hell is happening? My job gone. Call me. This can't be a coincidence." I left them unread, letting the silence speak for me. Her world was unraveling thread by thread, and I felt no urge to intervene. The empire she'd flaunted, the one that made her feel superior, had been propped up by invisible strings I'd held all along. By the afternoon of the third day, the panic had escalated. I got a voicemail from Teresa, her voice cracking with desperation. "Gavin, if you know anything about this, please. The bakery is everything to me." I deleted it without a second thought. Damon, true to form, vanished from the radar. Rumors swirled that he'd fled the city, liquidating what little personal assets he had left. His promising deals. Dust. Aspire's clients jumped ship, sensing instability, and the agency's stock, if it had any, would have plummeted to zero. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across my living room, there was a knock at my door. I checked the security feed. Cassandra, disheveled, her usual polished makeup, smudged, clutching an envelope like a lifeline. I led her in, gesturing to the couch without a word. She stepped inside hesitantly, the grandeur of the space hitting her anew. She'd only been here a handful of times, always dismissing it as my work retreat. "Gavin," she started, her voice trembling, "everything is falling apart. My job, Mom's bakery, even Damon's company. It's all connected somehow. I don't understand." I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her. "Sit down," I said calmly. She did, perching on the edge like she might bolt. "If this is some kind of revenge," I interrupted by sliding a thick folder across the coffee table toward her. "Open it." Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages: financial reports, wire transfer records, anonymous grant agreements. Page after page detailed the infusions I'd made Teresa's Delights, rescued from bankruptcy with a $500,000 anonymous loan last year. Aspire PR's expansion funded by a charitable foundation grant of $1.2 million. Damon Enterprises seeded with $750,000 in venture capital through a proxy investor. All traced back to Bainbridge Capital's philanthropic arm, which I controlled. She looked up, eyes wide with shock. You did all this. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because real kindness doesn't need applause," I replied evenly. "I wanted to see if you'd value me without knowing. If your family would treat me as more than a punchline. But you didn't. You kissed him in front of me, let your mother humiliate me, and tossed divorce papers like I was trash." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know." "Gavin, I swear if I'd known, you'd have stayed." I cut in, my tone steady but firm. "That's the point, Cassandra. You shouldn't need to know someone's worth in dollars to treat them with respect. Everything you had, the promotions, the stability, even Damon's so-called success, it was from me. And now it's gone because you showed me it's wasted on people like you." She sobbed, clutching the envelope tighter. "Please, we can fix this. I'll leave Damon. Mom's in the hospital from the stress. My brother, he's lost everything too." I shook my head. "That's not my burden anymore. You made your choices that night." She stood, leaving the envelope on the table, a handwritten apology I later saw, full of regrets and pleas. But words meant nothing now. She walked out, shoulders slumped into the hallway's dim light. I didn't follow. As the door clicked shut, I picked up the folder and filed it away, knowing the real unraveling was just beginning for her. She'd learned soon enough that betrayal's cost wasn't just financial. It was the hollow echo of a life built on illusions. Cassandra's attempts to salvage her crumbling world were frantic, like someone clawing at sand, slipping through their fingers. She bombarded banks with calls pleading for extensions on frozen accounts, but the responses were uniform: irrevocable termination due to investor withdrawal. Old colleagues at Aspire PR distanced themselves, citing the agency's implosion as unforeseen but final. Her brother, once so smug, now crashed on her couch, jobless and bitter, blaming everyone but himself. And Damon, that slick opportunist, vanished like smoke in the wind. I'd heard through my networks he drained what Little personal funds remained in joint ventures, hopped a flight to Miami, and cut all ties. Left her with a mountain of shared debts and a voicemail. "Sorry, babe, but broke isn't my scene." Teresa fared no better. The stress from losing the bakery chain hit her hard. She collapsed one afternoon amid the chaos of repossessions, ending up in the ER with hypertension and a minor stroke. From her hospital bed, surrounded by beeping monitors and sterile white walls, she gripped Cassandra's hand and whispered, "You threw away the one man who truly cared." Those words, laced with regret, echoed in Cassandra's ears as she navigated mounting medical bills and eviction notices on her mother's home, the same one I'd anonymously saved from foreclosure 2 years prior. I stayed removed from it all, focusing on Bainbridge Capital's latest acquisitions. My days blurred into meetings with venture partners, reviewing portfolios that spanned tech startups and real estate flips across Georgia and beyond. The empire I'd built in silence continued to thrive, untouched by the drama I'd unleashed. But Cassandra wouldn't fade quietly. A week after our confrontation in my penthouse, she appeared at my door again unannounced. No makeup, no designer clothes, just jeans, a faded sweater, and eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. She looked like a shadow of the woman who'd kissed another man in front of me on Christmas Eve. "Gavin," she said, her voice cracking as I let her in, "I'm not here to beg for us. I know that's gone. But I need something, a way to start over. I've lost everything, my job, my savings, even my so-called friends. Damon's gone. Mom's barely holding on. I can work, I can rebuild, but I don't know how when I've shattered my own foundation." I stood there, arms folded, studying her. The arrogance that once defined her was stripped away, leaving raw vulnerability. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, felt a flicker of pity. But pity wasn't forgiveness. I walked to my desk, pulling out a simple white card from a drawer. It bore the logo of the Atlanta Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, a program I'd founded anonymously 3 years ago to support women restarting careers after setbacks. "Here," I said, handing it to her. "This is a 1-year scholarship for their startup program. Full tuition mentorship, even a small stipend for basics. I'm the primary donor, but you'll enter as an anonymous participant. No special treatment, no shortcuts. You'll compete like everyone else, pitch ideas, face rejections, build from zero." Her fingers trembled as she took it, reading the details. You do this after everything. "It's not for you," I replied coolly. "It's for the woman you could become if you earn it. But understand, no strings. I won't monitor your progress. I won't be there to catch you if you fall again." She wiped a tear, clutching the card like a lifeline. "Will you watch from afar? See if I make it." I met her gaze, unblinking. "I've seen enough, Cassandra. It's time you walk your own path without me as your safety net." She nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. "No more pleas, no dramatic sobs." She turned toward the door, pausing just once. "Thank you," she whispered, then slipped out into the elevator's hum. I moved to the window, the city lights twinkling below like distant stars. Relief washed over me, not from vengeance, but from liberation. I'd freed myself from the toxic web of her family, from the illusion of a love built on secrets. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd squandered every opportunity I'd given. Now, with the card in her hand, Cassandra had one last chance, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let their darkness define my light. As the snow resumed its gentle fall outside, I knew this chapter was closing and my story was just beginning anew. 6 months had passed since that final confrontation in my penthouse hallway, and Atlanta had moved on as cities do, buzzing with new ventures, fresh scandals, and the relentless churn of ambition. I'd thrown myself deeper into Bainbridge Capital, overseeing expansions into sustainable tech and urban renewal projects that spanned from Georgia to the West Coast. The empire I'd built in the shadows was now fully in the light, earning me invitations to speak at events I'd once funded anonymously. One such evening found me on stage at the Georgia World Congress Center addressing a crowd of aspiring entrepreneurs at the Atlanta Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative's annual gala. The spotlight warmed my face as I shared lessons from my journey how trust was the most valuable currency in business, more fragile than any stock, and how misplaced faith could bankrupt a life faster than any market crash. I didn't mention Cassandra by name. My talk focused on broader truths, the cost of surrounding yourself with people who valued your wallet over your worth, and the freedom that came from cutting those ties. As I scanned the audience, my eyes caught a familiar figure in the back row, Cassandra notebook in hand, dressed simply in a blouse and slacks, her hair tied back without the usual flair. She looked focused, scribbling notes, a far cry from the woman who'd once commanded rooms with her charisma. Our gazes met briefly. She offered a small, tentative nod, but I didn't acknowledge it. I wrapped up my speech to applause, stepping off the stage into a flurry of handshakes and business cards. She didn't approach, and I didn't seek her out. That chapter was closed. From what I'd gleaned through indirect channels program updates I received as a donor without specifics on individuals, Cassandra had embraced the scholarship. She lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in the southern suburbs, commuting by public transit to an entry-level job at a local marketing firm. Evenings were spent in classes pitching startup ideas for eco-friendly PR tools, facing rejections and revisions like everyone else. No shortcuts, no nepotism. She'd learned the hard way, budgeting on a shoestring salary, weighing every grocery item in the aisle, staring at a bank balance that dipped into single digits more than once. There were nights I imagined when the weight of her choices hit her tears over instant coffee instead of lattes, silence in place of laughter. Damon remained a ghost. Last I'd heard, he was entangled in lawsuits from jilted investors in Florida. Teresa had recovered physically, but sold off family heirlooms to cover debts, retreating to a smaller condo with her son, who finally took a manual job to make ends meet. I didn't revel in their struggles. Revenge had never been my goal. Reclamation was. By withdrawing my support, I'd simply remove the crutches they'd mistaken for their own strength. Now, as I drove home from the gala, the city lights streaking past my window, a profound peace settled over me. No bitterness lingered, just the quiet satisfaction of a life realigned. I'd poured years into people who saw me as disposable, but in reclaiming my resources, I'd rediscovered my purpose, building legacies that endured, not illusions that crumbled. Cassandra from afar seemed to grasp it too. She didn't chase redemption from me. She forged her own. In that, perhaps, lay the truest lesson. Betrayal didn't just scar the betrayed, it exposed the betrayer's voids. I'd walked away not to punish, but to preserve my integrity. As I entered my apartment, the door clicking shut behind me, I knew some absences were louder than any confrontation. They'd laughed at me once, but I'd left them with the echo of their own emptiness. And in that silence, I'd found my voice stronger, unshaken, and finally free.